The Minotaurs, the brazen spear of the Emperor, the fury of the Space Marines unleashed, pragmatic, brutal, efficient, and most importantly, completely uncompromising. They are looked upon with disdain and hatred by most other chapters, and although they possess an impressive score of victories, they remain shrouded in mystery, seemingly by the order of the High Lords of Terra themselves. The Space Marines of this chapter are known to be antagonistic to just about anyone. They are brutal and uncaring for casualties and destruction, and are known for being deeply distrusting of others. However, this reputation used to be completely different, and to find out why, we're going to have to take a look at their shadowy origins. Most of this chapter's mysterious nature is owing to the fact that records on them have been sealed so tightly that even members of the Emperor's Holy Inquisition do not have access to them. We know that they are recorded as having been founded in M36 alongside other cursed founding chapters, such as the Black Dragons. However, this date conflicts with their first recorded appearance in M32, a whole 4,000 years before that point. This might of course just be a discrepancy, some mistake in the dates tallied by the Administratum, but with the bulk of their details locked up by Imperial decree, it seems odd to leave such an obvious mistake in the publicly available records where it can spur more questions. Aside from this point, however, the Minotaurs seem to be like any other 21st founding chapter, meaning that they were broken or unlucky in some obvious way. The Minotaurs reportedly were created using a chimeric gene seed, meaning that their genetic heritage came from two sources, and this manifested as completely untamed aggression. During recorded actions they took part in across M36, 37, and 38, the Minotaurs became known as little more than berserkers. They were always among the first Astartes to respond to requests for aid. They would then show up, proceed to snub local commanders, mortal or space marine, ignore any battle plans, and simply charge the enemy until the day was won. This, of course, did not win them any friends, which was apparently fine with the solitary Minotaurs. And by the time they dropped off the face of Imperial records in M38, almost no one would work with them. We don't know why the Minotaurs disappear at this moment in history, but they would be presumed lost for almost 3,000 years, reappearing suddenly in M41. In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. But at least you can roll in style. Whether you're battling across the war-torn battlefields of 40K or diving into a D&D campaign, imagine rolling dice that are truly yours, custom-built to reflect your hero. Hero Forge, the masters of custom miniatures, are launching 3D printed custom dice on Kickstarter. You can personalize every detail, from a bust of your character to their trusty companion to their favorite bundle of dynamite. These dice are built using the same high-quality 3D printing process as Hero Forge's full-color miniatures, ensuring each die is both perfectly balanced and visually stunning. You get complete control over the design. Choose your polyhedral dice shape, number, size, colors, and even what's inside. Whether it's a tiny bust of your custom hero, an orc warboss, or a relic from a legendary campaign, the choice is yours. And for the first time, you can even design your own decals, handheld items, or outfits to be added to Hero Forge as part of their Kickstarter rewards. Check out the Kickstarter campaign today by clicking the link down below in the description to see all backing tier options and to gear up for your next big tabletop adventure with our new custom dice. And don't delay, the Kickstarter ends April 5th. In the waning years of the conflict surrounding the Macarian heresy, two Astartes chapters who had been allied for much of the fighting had begun a series of skirmishes to settle a matter of honor. This controlled contest between the Doom Warriors chapter and the Inceptors chapter quickly spiraled out of control, and the two began killing each other in earnest. If you would like to know more about this conflict, we went into greater detail during our Ultramarine Successors video earlier. But suffice to say that after the long drawn-out conflicts of the Macarian heresy, the High Lords of Terra were in no mood to just let two Space Marine chapters destroy a system because they were cranky over something. And this seemed like the perfect time to test out their newest toys because they sent in the Minotaurs to settle things. Dropping out of the warp at the helm of brand new strike cruisers and landing craft, the Bronze Warriors of the Minotaurs seemingly wasted very little words on their brothers from the Doom Warriors and Inceptors, instead launching immediate strikes at both. Both of these chapters were ragged and badly in need of resupply at this point, and the Doom Eagles quit the field and burned as fast as they could away from the system. The Inceptors were not so lucky. These Ultramarine successors were proud and would not yield, which was seemingly fine by the Minotaurs, who proceeded to slowly encircle them, picking warriors off one by one until less than 100 Inceptors remained, and they were forced to surrender. Gone were the Minotaurs of the 38th millennium. These bronze hoplites were methodical, pragmatic, efficient, but still deeply isolationist, and above all, brazenly cruel. As further punishment for their transgressions, the Minotaurs took many chapter relics from the Inceptors, as well as their battle barge to use as a new flagship. They did all of this under the willing protection and seeming direction of the High Lords of Terra. So while the Minotaurs had miraculously returned and were listening to battle plans, coordinating with fellow Imperial forces, and acting like real soldiers finally, this clear favoritism from the High Lords raised a number of gigantic red flags, and the Inquisition began to investigate. For their part, the Ultramarines and their successors all spoke loudly in defense of their brother chapter, the Inceptors. The pillaging of relics and their sacred battle barge was unforgivable, and to this day, the Minotaurs are not allowed inside the realm of Ultramar. In fact, many successors of the 13th Legion have sworn to avenge this crime if they ever get the chance to, which is pretty extreme. The Yuscreen incident is cited as the biggest reason why fellow Marines deeply distrust the Minotaurs. Their erratic behavior and ties to the High Lords, combined with other discrepancies such as being a chapter-based fleet yet possessing a fortress monastery on some far-off unrecorded world, has led those within the Ecclesiarchy and Inquisition, particularly those of the Ordo Hereticus, to make numerous attempted investigations into the chapter. All of these investigations, however, are directly stopped from so up high that it becomes muddy to tell if they originate from within their own orders or from Terra itself. In some cases, not only have investigating agents been found dead and the Minotaurs to be found nowhere in sight, but even led to the reported destruction of an entire rogue trader vessel. Prior records have been locked behind seals that only a select few within the Inquisition may bypass, leaving few other details available for public records. Surprisingly, the Minotaurs remain almost completely Codex compliant, maintaining the standard 10 companies and 1,000 battle brothers. In fact, it has been noted that their ability to replenish their numbers is remarkably quick compared to other chapters, owing to their extensive use of hypno-indoctrination and brain surgeries. They are currently led by the chapter master Asterion Moloch, a Marine of considerable age, although we'll get into that more later. They also have a Reclusiarch on record, a master chaplain by the name of Ivanus Incomi, so we know they have religious leadership. Their only deviations are found within the names of ranks or the existence of positions that are second in command of a company but don't seem to be the same as a veteran sergeant or lieutenant. Title variations also exist for units like their Contemptor Dreadnoughts, those being referred to as Hecaton, and of course, the heavy reliance on brain surgeries and hypno-indoctrination might not be too strange during the neophyte process, but there are reports that these techniques are used to occasionally refresh the effects in full-blooded Marines. Culturally, the chapter could not be more different than other chapters. Their disregard for civilian life might not be uncommon among the transhuman warriors of the Adeptus Astartes, but their use of attrition warfare and ruthless assaults are. Marines don't typically measure their victories in acceptable casualties, but the Minotaurs appear to. The honor and righteousness of the Space Marines are replaced with barely restrained spite and malice, and their paranoia, even against allies, is legendary. Famously, the construction of the Minotaurs' flagship, the Daedalus Crata, is made to be a literal labyrinth, with Lord Moloch's command throne at the center. These Marines trust absolutely no one. That being said, the Minotaurs of the 41st millennium have been able to work with other Astartes forces well, with even the Death Watch reporting that their Minotaurs brothers continue to serve with honor and distinction, if being a little brazen and pragmatic. Within this chapter, respect is only awarded to the God Emperor of mankind, as even the previously stated Hecaton Contemptors are treated poorly, instead of with the reverence other chapters typically give to their honored dreadnoughts. The Minotaurs are also known for their willingness to prove themselves against any foe, extending to their warriors almost willingly coming to blows with even the legendary Custodes. This mentality fits well with their style of warfare, which is now marked by sudden lightning strikes, led by a vanguard of armored vehicles, supported by speeders and flyers to quickly crush obstacles. With the Minotaurs' aggressive expertise in close combat quarters, it should not be overlooked that they are just as capable during sieges, armored conflict, or void warfare. though even in these arenas, the Minotaurs still prefer bold assaults and overwhelming force. The chapter's armory since their reemergence in M41 has always been noted to be very well stocked. Rare war gear such as Deimos pattern tanks is not surprising. These vehicles did stop production sometime during the Age of Apostasy, which followed soon after the Minotaurs' supposed founding in M36. What remains baffling, however, is their access to nearly a dozen Contemptor pattern dreadnoughts and other rare dreadnought patterns, as well as Relic Tartarus Terminator armor, Spartan assault tanks, and their access to functional Storm Eagle gunships. Most of these pieces are rare amongst any chapter, not of the first or second founding, yet the Minotaurs seemingly have an armory stocked with them, leading to further suspicion from observers. Despite the uneasiness and lack of trust given to them by other chapters, the Minotaurs served all throughout the 41st millennium with distinction, albeit with their trademark cruelty. For the most part, they seem to have been used to destroy renegade chapters and force non-compliant ones back into the Emperor's light, or back under the High Lord's rule to be more accurate. The Cleansing of the Night Reapers chapter comes to mind, where the Minotaurs worked with the Red Templars and the Grey Knights to track and horrifically maul a formerly loyal chapter that had begun using chaotic sorcery and Xenos weaponry to survive a desperate penitent crusade. But of course, the Minotaurs also took part in some of the largest battles and conflicts of the millennium, proving their worth dozens of times over. They were amongst the first chapters to arrive at Rin's world to support the badly wounded Crimson Fist chapter after a massive orc ambush. And of course, the Minotaurs would play a pivotal role in the Orphean War, sacrificing most of their Void Navy and many First Company veterans to force a powerful Necron Lord to retreat. But clearly, one of their most iconic campaigns was the Badab War. Being one of the most intense Astartes civil wars since the Horus Heresy, it makes sense that the Minotaurs were sent into the thick of the fighting. The Astral Claws had turned from the Emperor's light and had convinced both the Lamentors and Mantis Warriors chapters to join them under false pretenses, of course. However, it didn't matter to the Minotaurs at all that their brothers had been tricked. They were deployed to the Badab system to quell a rebellion, and quell it they did. Many other forces were involved in that conflict, which will definitely be getting its own video at some point. But the Minotaurs had an impressive armory at this point, and were tasked with holding the southern end of the Maelstrom conflict zone against the Lamentors. And with the same ferocity we saw during the Yuscreen incident, the Minotaurs swiftly and brutally attacked until barely 300 Lamentors remained to imprison and await judgment. Here again, we see the Minotaurs taking relics and ships, adding the Lamentors' battle barge to their fleet, and using it to continue pursuing the will of their shadowy masters on Terra. More recently, the chapter has been spotted at Cadia before the world was destroyed by the forces of chaos, and at some point after that, the chapter lost almost all of its gene seed while battling the corrupting forces of the Death Guard, who attacked the Minotaurs' fortress monastery before being driven off. It's here that the Minotaurs headed to Terra in order to gather fresh gene seed from the vaults, and found the planet in conflict. Corrupt High Lords had just come face to face with a newly revived Rabute Gilliman, Primarch of the Ultramarines and son of the Emperor himself, and they attempted a coup rather than lose their power. The Imperial Fists and Custodes stationed at the palace originally feared that the Minotaurs, by reputation, were there to aid the High Lords. However, the bronze-armored Marines start helping to rout out chaotic cultists that have been hiding amongst the Terran pilgrims for years and had taken advantage of this moment to attack. The Minotaurs did eventually come to blows with the Custodes and other Imperial forces during this time, as it became unclear which High Lords were loyal and which were not. But after having a conversation with the last remaining High Lord, the Minotaurs stood down and were given some of the first of the new Primaris recruits before leaving to pursue other conflicts. So okay, what exactly is going on with these Space Marines? Normally, this is the point where we would sum up what we know and give our conclusions about the chapter we're discussing, but the problem is that we don't even really know who the Minotaurs are, but we do have some theories. Everything we've discussed so far has been either information publicly available about the chapter or hard-won by inquisitorial agents who have a bad habit of going missing whenever they go looking into the truth about the Minotaur's origin and who exactly is pulling their strings. It's certainly not a stretch to say that with the evidence we have, it's clear that the Minotaurs are a chapter made specifically to answer to the High Lords of Terra alone. A personal army of super soldiers beholden to the human governments of the Imperium above all other authority, which is, of course, heresy, but that's hardly the most damning conclusion from our discussion today. First off, we need to address that discrepancy in the dates of their founding. Their first recorded battles taking place in M32 is a huge indicator of our first big puzzle piece. The Minotaurs are either more than one chapter, or they are the same chapter that has been tampered with and reinvented over and over since their creation. The first iteration of the chapter would have begun around M32, just after the end of the Horus Heresy. In the aftermath of that conflict, many loyalist members of the traitor legions were essentially left homeless. Some would go on to join other legions, especially the Ultramarines, or specialist chapters and projects like the Grey Knights, Death Watch, or the newly formed Inquisition. The first part of our theory suggests that this very first version of the Minotaurs was formed from a group of surviving loyalists from traitor legions, specifically the Iron Warriors. This idea is mostly due to the fact that the mentions of the Minotaurs from M32 show a chapter much more like the one in the 41st millennium. Brutal, pragmatic, but still deeply strategic and willing to cooperate with other Imperial groups. Skipping forwards to the Cursed Founding, we see a completely different group of Marines, and then again in M41 when they reappear after dropping off the map for a few millennia. So, what's going on? Well, one answer comes from Edwin Brown, a playtester for the original Bad Ab War campaign. Brown is reportedly the creator of what we currently know as the Minotaurs, and he has confirmed that the Minotaurs of the 41st millennium and the Minotaurs of the Cursed Founding with their chimeric gene seed were two different chapters. He also confirms that the current Minotaurs were created using Iron Warrior stock, so that's pretty definitive. Now, GW can and has rewritten and recontextualized their lore many times in the past, and just because the original creator intended these things with the Minotaurs doesn't mean the company hasn't changed it afterwards. However, since the chapter still very much acts like a bunch of Iron Warriors, it's likely a safe bet that this lore is still true. Then add to that their impressive and ancient armory. The Minotaurs could certainly have been supplied with such powerful and well-preserved war gear by their powerful Terran masters, but it's more likely that they have been keeping a well-curated inventory for millennia in addition to stealing other chapters' war gear whenever they can. And finally, the warriors of the chapter themselves. We mentioned before that the Minotaurs make extensive use of hypno-indoctrination and neurosurgeries, even on battle brothers who have completed their transformation. This would only really need to be done if the chapter's leadership were concerned with some sort of degradation in the minds of its warriors, which leads us into probably the wildest theory. The current Minotaurs have had their personalities overwritten with those of long-dead Space Marine veterans of the Horus Heresy. So bear with us on this one, but it is a possibility. The extra mental conditioning that the Minotaurs undergo could very easily be doing this work, that is, making sure the new personalities stay in control, and the biggest hint that this might be true is Chapter Master Asterion Moloch himself. Moloch has reportedly been killed in action only to be recovered alive no less than 7 times in the last 500 years alone. He has been active in the chapter for at least a millennium since the chapter's reappearance at the beginning of M41, making him one of the oldest serving Space Marines alive. Now, Moloch has reportedly been substantially augmented with cybernetics as he's lost bits and pieces of himself over the past millennium, and maybe that can account for his longevity, but the extra indoctrinations and his miraculous survivals seem to point to the idea that Asterion Moloch is an implanted personality inherited by every new chapter master of the Minotaurs. This would be a huge benefit for 2 reasons. First, it would allow every Minotaur Space Marine, no matter how new, to instantly have the experience and skill of a veteran many hundred years their senior. And second, it would allow for some programming. The final piece of this puzzle is the extreme amount of control the High Lords seemingly exert on this group of warriors. Every Space Marine is loyal, but when you rush to Terra to defend the High Lords against the Custodes, the Imperial Fists, and the newly risen son of the Emperor himself, that's something much different. In that coup attempt we mentioned, we said that Moloch had a conversation with the last remaining High Lord before leaving, but we sort of swept past the details in order to save it for this, because it wasn't a conversation. As the coup was falling apart, the Minotaurs prepared to defend the fleeing traitorous High Lords, until Violetta Roskavler, the current master of the Administratum, approached Lord Moloch in his massive suit of bronze Terminator armor and whispered something into his ear. Moloch immediately withdrew. If that doesn't scream psycho conditioning, I don't know what does. And so now we have this whole picture, and our theory is this. The original Minotaurs chapter was formed from the loyal survivors of the traitor legions and were at some point either destroyed or otherwise mysteriously vanished. It's probable that in this time when the Imperium was creating many new offices and secretive forces like the Inquisition or the Grey Knights, that these veterans came to work for the High Lords of Terra specifically, as they saw a need to have a chapter that would help them achieve their goals. Regardless of how it happened, by M36 the High Lords were in need of another chapter for this exact purpose and likely ordered one created from chimeric gene seed stock to try and gain some new power. And they gave this force the name and heraldry of their old favorite chapter to continue that legacy. This ended up working about as well as any other cursed founding chapters, and the High Lords seemingly either let these wild berserkers burn out fighting useless wars or eliminated them some other way. Flash forward to M41, and a full-strength and immaculately equipped Minotaurs chapter appears out of nowhere and proceeds to stomp battle-hardened Astartes chapters at the request of the High Lords, and they continue to do so without question for the next 1,000 years. We believe that the High Lords somehow saved at least some of the key personalities of the original Minotaurs from M32 and slowly rebuilt their perfect lapdogs from scratch after the failure of the Cursed Founding, using those saved personalities to ensure not only success, but total loyalty. But what do you think? There are certainly more theories out there, including one where Astarion Moloch is a Custodes warrior or remnants of the Lost Legions somehow. It seems like this chapter was made to inspire this exact sort of fan activity, so don't stay quiet. Let us know in the comments what you think the Minotaurs are, where they came from, and what we might have missed. As always, make sure you've liked and subscribed, or you might find the High Lords sending this chapter after you in order to bring you back into the fold for more lore.